Well, hello, everybody. I've taken my mask out of my pocket. I'm David Kirkpatrick with Techonomy. Welcome to the fifth in our virtual roundtable series, which is celebrating and leading up to the Health of Our and Wealth of Our Planet conference next Tuesday here in New York City at City Winery, Tuesday the 20th from 9 a.m. to 4:30. And it's going to be a great conference. Tell you a little more about that at the end, but what we are talking about today is something I think really critical to the success in addressing this grave crisis we all face, which is getting more obvious with every passing day. And that is, how can climate startups really succeed? And I think what we're going to hear about today is some very creative thinking that Elemental Accelerator has put into that question. We're very pleased to be partnering with Elemental Accelerator today. And Saritha Peruri from there will be our first speaker. But the basic idea here is that having a great product or service is not enough. You really have to have a very clear understanding of how to address a market that's real, and you have to have a strategy for separating yourself from the crowd and getting in front of the key partners that will be necessary for your technology or service to have the impact that you want it to have. And in a time when our capitalist system is still more or less dominated by giant companies that are universally besieged with solicitations of all sorts, the question, they want to do the right thing in many cases, in a growing number of cases, maybe not enough cases, but still most companies are moving towards wanting to do the right thing. But they don't know how to work with startups. So what we're going to hear today is, in addition to Elemental, we're going to hear from Next Era Energy. Kara Fuller, who's the innovation leader in their digital innovation lab, will be joining us. You'll be surprised to learn about Next Era Energy. It's a huge utility company that is doing all kinds of things. And what we're going to also hear from, we're going to hear from Robert Brook, who's the Senior Vice President and General Manager for the Americas at NERA, which is a electric utility infrastructure design firm, and Adam Tank, who is Chief Customer Officer at Transcend, which is a company that has a lot of overlap with NERA, but focuses more on water and sewage infrastructure. And it turns out that designing these things really matters, and how you think about the design and management of the infrastructure is going to be of increasing importance as we move towards a sustainable society, which we must do. So I didn't fully introduce Saritha before. She is Saritha Peruri, the Head of Corporate Partnerships at Elemental Accelerator. Welcome, Saritha. And I think it might be good for you to start out by just telling us a little bit about what Elemental Accelerator is, because I see it as quite a unique organization. And again, thank you for your partnership in making today's conversation happen. And I should also say we're recording this, so it will be available after the fact for all of you and anyone who wasn't able to make it today. So Saritha, tell us about what Elemental is and what it's doing, and particularly with these particular partners.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for having us today. So Elemental Accelerator, we are, the name suggests, a climate tech accelerator. We invest in 15 to 20 companies developing groundbreaking solutions in energy, mobility, food and agriculture, water, circular economy every year. Specifically, this panel has to do with corporate and startup engagement. So my team at Elemental Navigator, helps corporates navigate the climate tech ecosystem, as the name suggests, and we help our founders navigate corporates that can be large and hard to get around. So we're really focused on increasing corporate startup engagement in the Elemental Navigator team. And what we mean by engagement is identifying motivated partners that can make meaningful strategic investments in climate tech startups, and also meaningfully engage through pilot projects that can commercially scale. And so the panelists that we are with today, what they all have in common is the 2021 NextEra Innovation Challenge. So when we created this challenge with Kara, who took a chance on us, it was our pilot of this type of opportunity. In the spirit of innovation and iteration, we launched this to see how it goes. So we had spent a couple of years working with our corporates, asking them what their priorities were in terms of sustainability related innovation, made hundreds of introductions, a dozen or so of which did result in investments in pilot projects, but we wanted more, because the earth doesn't have time, our founders don't have time, right? They need to hit specific milestones at certain times to raise the next round. So we were just really saying, okay, what else can we do to unlock corporate engagement? And so we have a number of founders on our team, and of course, a number of founders in our portfolio, soon to be 150 companies. And we asked them, like, what, we've seen these innovation challenges around, like, what do you like about them? What do you not? And kind of what we kept coming back to is that founders said that if they're going to do an innovation challenge, it had to result in something. It couldn't be just an invitation to pitch your idea to executives and make them smarter. And maybe in 6 to 12 months, something would come out of it. So we specifically have designed our innovation challenges. And NextEra was like, okay, let's try it, where we insist on our partners to publicly commit to a meaningful amount of funding that will be deployed at the end of these live pitch events. We want to make sure that there are high profile senior execs on the judges panel that have the ability to make decisions, that own their own budgets, so they own the purse and can deploy capital. And we tried that out with NextEra last year. We had a really overwhelming response in terms of, in a 4-week period or so, we had nearly 130 applicants. NextEra had, had I think quite a hard time whittling down to the finalists, like 6 finalists, because the caliber was so high. And we're ready to fund 1, maybe 2 companies, and out of that came 3 funded pilots. And two of the folks, Nira and Transcend, that we are on the line with
4.
today. Oh, sorry. Well,
4 funded pilots.
And we're here to just talk about how it went and why it worked. And again, we're just super grateful. And it went so well that NextEra doubled down and signed up for a 2022 challenge, which is live right now, and we're able to generate some good FOMO. And so we now we've launched a challenge with Amazon last week as well, and the country of New Zealand wanting to work with us to decarbonize their grid. So
Wow.
very exciting, and there's a lot of momentum to do challenges like this that have a pretty quick turnaround, and can get companies working with some of the largest names in the world.
Great. Well, thank you, Saritha. And I think in a little while, we may want to hear a little more about your work with Amazon in New Zealand. That sounds pretty provocative.
Sure.
And for those who might be, Elemental Accelerator is a very unusual organization. It's a nonprofit that invests in for-profit startups.
Yeah.
It got a lot of its money from Laureen Powell Jobs, which is somebody who seems to be making waves all across society. She isn't even the richest one of these billionaires, but she is really having an impact. So every time I talk to you Elemental people, I respect her more, not to mention when I read The Atlantic. But anyway, help me, Saritha, introduce Kara by talking a little bit about what you've learned about NextEra Energy, because it seems like a company that has a uniquely determined commitment to some of these sustainability progress issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kara can chat about NextEra better than I can, but I will say that before I joined Elemental, I was a utility scale wind solar developer, and I can't even tell you how many RFPs I have lost to NextEra. So super innovative and really focused on scaling and scaling viably. To be able to launch innovation challenges with the largest renewable energy owner operator in the world was it was an honor. And we are so excited to be able to bring this type of innovation to NextEra, and also to our founders to be able to pilot their technology and to work with companies like NextEra. I think absolutely transformational. So, NextEra was recognized by Forbes as one of the most innovative companies in the world. And, we're seeing that absolutely through our partnership with them.
Great. And NextEra emerged out of Florida Power and Light. And I think even when it was just Florida Power and Light, it was one of the leading investors in solar in the world. And it's really grown from there. So Kara, tell us a little more about NextEra just to start, and then tell us what you do. And when you think about Transcend and NERA, how are you working with them?
Absolutely. Yes. So NextEra Energy, we like to joke internally that it's the biggest company you've never heard of. We're like Saritha said, the leader of renewable energy in North America. And I want to say the world as well, but you'd have to fact check me on that. But recently we doubled down on our commitment to renewables by making a pledge to decarbonize our entire grid. And by doing that, decarbonize our entire business and then help others decarbonize.
Oh, wait,
so
how big is your grid? Just talk about the scale of your company for a second. So
Absolutely.
people can get a sense of what that means, because that's a pretty impressive aim for the scale of utility that you are.
Yes, absolutely. We're the first utility to make a claim quite that large. So that gets rid of all of our natural gas assets as well. We haven't had coal now for several years, but that would have gone away as well. But our grid inside of Florida is about 5.3 million customers, and we have business in, I believe, 38 states and Canada, with renewable assets outside of the state of Florida. So definitely far-reaching across North America. But when you talk about decarbonizing the grid for 5.3 million customers, that means a very, very drastic shift in our renewable and our generation portfolio from a mostly peaker plant, natural gas plant facing utility to then scaling from, I believe it's 5,000 kilowatts of solar to 90,000 kilowatts of solar by 2040.
Wow.
So that's some pretty aggressive goals that we have for our organization just in Florida. And when you start scaling that to the rest of the country, and then being able to then be a leader for our customers as well to help them meet their renewable goals and their carbon-free goals, it makes me very proud to work for a company like this. So obviously, when you have big goals like that, you have to be thinking about how to continually disrupt yourselves and how to think about doing things in a way that you've never done them before. And these innovation challenges and these proof of concept trials that we do with new businesses and new technologies critical to being able to achieve those really, really aggressive goals. So we're super, super excited to be working with the startups that came out of last year's challenge, and especially Transcend and NERA that we have represented here today. We're really excited about the results of their technology and how that will help us scale our business and continue to be able to do these good things that we want to do faster.
That's all great. Thank you for that. So you run the Digital Innovation Lab within IT at NextEra Energy, but you have other innovation labs also. Can you just quickly tell us what they are so people get a sense of all the different things that are happening at your impressive company?
Absolutely. So just like you mentioned, we're one of many innovation hubs within the organization. So my team faces innovation from a digital perspective. We specialize in robotics, IoT, software-enabled hardware, and I'm sure I'm missing something, but those typically are the types of technologies that we're looking to invest our time and energy in testing. So you can see that both NERA and Transcend fit those attributes very well. So they were very exciting for us to start POCs with. And when I say POCs, I'm referring to that proof of concept phrase again. The utility world, we have a bunch of acronyms, and I catch myself saying them sometimes, expecting people to know what I'm talking about. But yes, so my team is the Digital Innovation Lab. We're one of many epicenters, and it's not the only way that we bring new ideas and technology into the company. We also have an internal accelerator, 35 Mules, as well as an internal investment fund with a several $million endowment that they are investing every year into startups and new businesses as well. So there's many ways that we're engaging with the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, and so you're doing innovation in the area of power generation and other things, but what we're talking about here is more things that have to do with technology and how technology can improve the design and the management of infrastructure, which is so critical. Okay, Robert, I want to go to you. So tell us about NERA. What is it, and what are you trying to do at the macro level? And then tell us a little bit about what you've been working on with NextEra and the outcome of the contest that you guys triumphed in.
Sure, thanks. You know, I'd like to start off just by saying how much we appreciated the opportunity that came to us last year. It's difficult to get a chance to actually speak to the leading players inside of utilities. It's probably the biggest challenge that startup organizations have. And, you know, through this, it gave us an opportunity to really kind of cut through all of those barriers to have a meaningful conversation with people. And I think that's the fundamental thrust behind it. So we're pretty grateful for that as an opportunity. You know, NERA is a digital twin organization, and that's a really challenging term to use. I struggled with it for a long time, and I think I've become adjusted to it, mostly because it's an innovative way of being able to look at infrastructure. Traditionally, we've been able to look through maps or two-dimensional pieces, you know, like a GIS system or these sorts of things at infrastructure. And this digital twin is a new way of thinking about it. And you know, our digital twin is different. You know, there's probably hundreds of different digital twins, as many organizations who say they have one have a different one. And ours is really founded on the engineering and physics-based relationship between equipment. So, you know, in our platform, when you move a pole, it actually changes the insulator tension, it changes the insulator angles, and it changes the way that those pieces of equipment interact with the world around it. And I'm a former utility person, and you know, I think I've had this belief since I started that a utility's biggest challenge is that they spend a lot of money being able to put infrastructure into the ground, and as soon as they do, Mother Nature spends all of its effort trying to rip it apart. And that's the biggest challenge that organizations have. So, you know, you mentioned design as for us as an organization, but that's only a small piece of what we do. Most of what we do is we help organizations mitigate the risks that are presented from Mother Nature against their equipment. So we use this environment, this digital twin, to run simulations. And those simulations can be used in climate-based events. They can look at equipment and its interaction with the world, all sorts of different things. And you know, this provides great opportunities for utilities, and you know, the climate advantages out of what we do are just sort of an outcome of the work we do. I don't think that was necessarily the foundation of why we did our work, but there's great outcomes that come from it. And you know, a great example is when you have a digital twin of a piece of infrastructure, it seriously reduces the number of times that people have to roll a truck to be able to go out and look at it. And that has a big carbon footprint outcome. You know, digital equipment, all new solar farms, renewable energies, one of the biggest challenges they have is being able to get that infrastructure onto the grid. So we help people look at line readings, what capacity they have left and where they can put new ones in. And every utility has a challenge with weather, right? Whether those are large storms, whether they're hurricanes. And what we're working with NextEra on is identifying the challenges that come from the interactions of that kind of a physical presence or force on their system.
So in a sense, what I think maybe both of your companies are going to be telling us is it's really about resilience as much as anything, which is one of the great challenges in a world being buffeted, like you say, by Mother Nature in a surprisingly severe way. A quick question before we get to Adam. One of the big challenges that utilities have had in recent years that they complain about constantly to regulators and everybody is that they're forced to receive solar power from anybody who puts it in and not just be transmitting, but also receiving. And do you help them with that kind of thing, integrating all of the individuals that have to be integrated into the grid in a two-way fashion now?
It is, you know, if I could go back 15 years, I think I would have invested a whole bunch of money in a billing system or something to manage that particular point, right? Because 15 years ago, you really had generation come from just a limited number of facilities, right? And now any house can be a potential generator. So there's that challenge, and you do find environments where, you know, the power that's generated from house systems, from small solar fields, et cetera, can't be consumed because there's no way to be able to deliver it back to the grid. So that's a touch point that we help organizations navigate is where do they have capacity? Where do they need additional capacity to be able to leverage and consume that renewable energy as it's generated?
So that's another climate impact you have, is that you ultimately will help them receive more renewable energy and allow the whole network to be more renewable, which is great. I know the Hawaii utility, I remember I was in Hawaii and heard a lot about, they had so many solar households come on so quickly that they had huge challenges figuring out how to deal with that. So, and just for the audience, your company is a little over 2 years old. Just give us a little more sense of its scale and what kind of things you're doing besides with NextEra.
Sure. So if you go back to the day that somebody first started writing code towards what our platform is, we're probably about 5 years old. But as a formalized company, we're a couple of years old. And you know, we've been able to go this last year through a pretty significant accelerated growth pattern. And I think when we went into the program last year, we were around 30 people. We're over 80 now. And I have a hard time referring to us as a startup anymore. I think we're actually a scale up now. And a big chunk of that has been through the relationships that we've been able to build through programs like this. So we work for a number of utilities, and the outcomes of what we do go into grid hardening programs, into maintenance programs, into new capital investments, these sorts of things. So I think we're proud to be able to say we've probably got more than 10 utilities as core customers in large implementations, and we have probably an equal number that we're in pilot work with. So programs like this have been incredibly valuable for us and have set us on a trajectory to be highly successful.
Fantastic. Thank you. Adam, welcome and thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about Transcend and how you have been working with NextEra, and maybe I'll follow up with some questions too.
Sure. So thank you for having me and having Transcend, and of course, Saritha, the Elemental team, and Kara at NextEra for putting this all together, because as Robert mentioned, one of the biggest challenges startups have is getting in front of the right people who can make decisions in some of these big companies. And this is a way to shortcut that process. So Transcend believes that the best outcomes for society are based on the best inputs, or the plans and the capital plans for infrastructure primarily. And the way that we think about it is that before something is put into the ground, before an asset, and especially a vertical asset, a wastewater treatment plant, infrastructure in transmission and distribution, a high-rise building, name your asset of choice, the best way to build the best piece of equipment or the best infrastructure is by thinking about it optimally from the very beginning, before it's even constructed, and in some cases before it's even designed in a detailed level. So what Transcend is doing is automating the conceptual design process for these vertical assets in order to help asset owners and engineers evaluate a range of potential scenarios for that asset that they couldn't have done traditionally using manual methods.
Well, before they even design it, you're saying, or at every stage, before, during, and after?
This is during the conceptual design phase.
Okay, good.
So this is the ability for an engineer or utility like NextEra to say, we considered putting, in the case of Transcend, we've been primarily focused on the water wastewater industry, but I'll get to the NextEra partnership in a second. We're going to put a wastewater treatment plant here, and here's what we think it should look like. And today, manually, that's a process that might take 6 months or a year and hundreds of thousands of expensive engineering hours to do. But with software like Transcend, the process is automated, and you could have 30 concepts for a wastewater treatment plant at a conceptual design level in an hour. It radically shifts how engineers and asset owners are thinking about the infrastructure that they're getting ready to build. The most important part of this, of course, referring to the sustainability aspect of all of this, is that when engineers now have the time and the capability to assess multiple design options, They can now evaluate things like the carbon footprint or the carbon impact of that infrastructure. What if we were to change the site and we reduce the land footprint of that infrastructure? What if we put it in a different location instead of this one, which would have a different impact on maybe the nature or the river or whatever is around that? So the goal, again, is to make sure that whatever is being built is not only being built optimally to begin with, but that you're evaluating all of the possibilities of what that infrastructure could be in order to determine the best outcome before it's put into place.
Is your business primarily US only at the moment? Do you have?
We sell globally. Yeah, we sell globally.
So how much are you doing outside the US at this point?
At this point, it's about 50-50.
Oh, good.
So
Great.
we have a number of large asset owners. So companies like NextEra, a number of utilities, water, wastewater utilities in South America and the UK. And then we also work directly with engineering firms and equipment suppliers.
And how old is the company?
So we were founded December 2019. The software has generated over 10,000 treatment plant designs to date, raised just north of $13 million from some of the world's leading sustainability investors.
So you're moving forward. I mean, the reason I ask about the global is, the biggest challenge the world faces is development, really, despite the fact that we have a massive climate crisis. It is not it's not separable from the fact that we still have a radically unequal world, and we have an obligation to bring the rest of the world into a reasonable standard of living and themselves, and we need to help them. So the kind of technology you're describing, when you were talking about it, it just made me realize, boy, if I lived in Botswana or Peru, I would be so pleased that this kind of capability has emerged, because I need to do it faster than they did in France and America, right? We've got to put infrastructure in for billions of people around the world at a shockingly rapid pace. And that is not optional. We got to do it.
That's right.
Good. Thank you for being able to help.
Yeah, of course. And I'll speak briefly to the NextEra engagement.
Yeah, now tell us what you're doing with NextEra.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, David, one of the challenges of bringing the world at large into a sustainable future is the ability to put assets into the ground, to build infrastructure. And what we're doing with NextEra is we are helping them overcome that hurdle or that bottleneck in the conceptual design of infrastructure, specifically in transmission and distribution, to bring the grid to more renewables. Because the challenge is not that we don't have the technology to do renewables. It's, if we're producing all this power, how do we manage it? And in many cases, we have to put in more charging stations. We have to put in more substations. We have to put in more switching stations. There's a whole host of infrastructure, and it takes so much time and effort from engineers, from planners, that can be streamlined by using a software like ours.
Do you compete with NERA then? I mean, are you guys overlapping in some degree, or?
Not at all. In fact, it's highly complementary. So if you can think about how the infrastructure should be built in the first place optimally, you combine what NERA is doing on digital twin, you now have a well-designed piece of infrastructure that's also operating optimally based on what it was originally intended to do from the conceptual design.
Okay, that's great. Saritha, it sounds like you have something to say. Oh, you're muted, so we can't even tell.
Oh, no, I actually didn't. Was just nodding along.
Okay, well, feel free to jump in at any point. I mean, Kara, so give us a little more about what you guys are able to do as a result of tapping the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So just because we put together the analytics on the Transcend process, we haven't actually started using their product yet because we're still in the configuration phase. But once we have the product deployed to our teams, we're estimating that it could speed up a 2-week process into less than 8 hours. And so when you start thinking about the scale that we're going to have to achieve when we're building the tens of thousands of gigawatts and megawatts of new generation that we were talking about earlier, that enables us to actually move with scale and move with speed in order to actually hit those goals. So when we start scaling that up to say, hey, if we're only doing 50 new substations a year and each substation takes 2 weeks, now if we can do 50 of those in 50 days, that's a big difference, right? So it's going to be a huge impact. So when we start looking at each one of these startups and we start actually putting numbers to pages, it's pretty impressive the new capabilities they unlock for our business and allow us to achieve. Nira is still early stage too, but I have really, really high expectations for them as well. And figuring out how we can be more intelligent about understanding where we really should be trimming and where we have more issues around our grid and transmission lines. So I'm really excited to see how that goes as well. But so I will say that we have about 15 projects on my team ongoing at any one moment. And so Transcend and Nira represent 2 of those 15. And I will say it's a pretty healthy mix of startup enabled proof of concept work versus the stuff that we're self-designing and self-starting internally. So it definitely allows us to really be able to do more faster. So definitely helpful to have that ecosystem at our hands.
As somebody myself who comes from covering the technology industry, who's now really getting very deep into climate matters, the fact that you focus on IT innovation is really significant. And I think most people haven't really digested the degree to which digital transformation is an intrinsic necessity for a sustainable transition. And, you know, companies in every industry have that challenge. But I guess I just be curious for you to make any observations, and maybe Robert would want to talk about this given his long background in the utility industry. You know, how should we be thinking about IT and digital technology at a sort of macro level as a tool for making a sustainable transition? You know, IoT is a big part of your work, for example, which I am fascinated by as a potentiality.
Absolutely. I will say that my manager who hired me started her job at the utility without a computer. And she started in the late 70s, early 80s. So you think about that time, it's less than 50 years. We've gone from being able to get by with power generation and power planning with a calculator, pencil and paper, to the point now where we're using AI and automation in order to do things that we wouldn't have even thought of before. So at this point now, we're not just serving electrons, we're thinking about how we can serve our customers as any tech company would, right? Like, what other products can we use and can we provide for our customers that are going to help them expand their use and improve their lives, like electric vehicles at the moment, which is again helping serve those other goals of renewable. And so it takes us from transforming ourselves into a table stake utility, like we just need to keep the lights on, into something that can actually enhance and improve the lives of the people we serve. So I think that's technology is the only reason we've been able to achieve that.
Great, Robert. So what's your thinking on this macro question of the role of digital technology in a sustainable transition?
You know, it's I hate to say I'm not quite old enough to remember when everything was in paper, but I'm pretty close to that. You know, the objective of a utility has never changed. They're still trying to do the same things, and it's really to deliver energy to a customer at the end of the day. I think all the technology is an enabler, right? It helps us be able to address the challenges that we face, to be able to provide efficiencies to an organization, to reduce that overall cost, and to mitigate the risks that are presented to a system. So, you know, without innovation, like the kind of things that Adam and I are talking about, utilities can't really address the economic challenges that they have in front of them, because every year it costs more to be able to do the same business that they have. So I think there's a strong alignment between the utility and what happens in that technology space, because without that partnership, you know, basically the industry becomes very difficult to deliver on their key objective.
Yeah. I'd love to ask any of you to comment on how the oddly named internet, it shows my brain, the Inflation Reduction Act changes the landscape. It's such a major shift in American policy, so overdue. but you're nodding at him. Does it give you more optimism? Do you think it's going to be a fundamental landscape shifter? And maybe Saritha, you can jump in on this also.
I would say it certainly gives me hope that we are, as a society, trending in the right direction. My concern is that if we continue to spend these dollars the way that we have over the last 50 years or century, they're going to largely go to waste, which is unfortunate. And so where my head is at, and I don't know if I speak for the others on this panel, if we can use technology to spend those dollars more effectively or more efficiently, then we're in a really good place. But if the dollars are being spent on the stuff that we've been doing traditionally for, as I mentioned, decades, not centuries, then it's going to go to waste, which is unfortunate. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of things I've been reading to just help understand all the pieces of the act. I think there are pieces that really are trying to push exactly in the direction that you're describing. It's not just money being thrown at something. They have some specific innovation tasks that they've tried to fund, et cetera. Saritha, what would you say about that?
For me, honestly, the most encouraging part of IRA, named that way because politics, but the most encouraging piece of that is that it gives the US a leg to stand on in international negotiations. And the US is really historically has been seen as a leader in technology and climate, and historically is the world's, cumulatively the world's largest emitter. So it now, lets us say, like, we have, on the international stage, we have done something. This is, the biggest commitment in U.S. history towards climate, aggressively with the extension of the production tax credits and making it, it expands the ability to scale up wind and solar tremendously with what's it called, 45Q on carbon removal. It centers justice in a way that the climate bill and past climate bills and funding have not, through EJ 40. Of course, much more could be done there, but it has brought equity to the center of the conversation as well, which of course we are really happy to see that.
Fantastic. I have turned on audio for Tara LeMay, my longtime friend who is a policy expert and serial entrepreneur. So Tara, quickly identify yourself beyond what I've just said and ask your question or make a comment.
Thanks, David. I have two questions based on what you guys are saying. I run Lens Ventures. We do large scale innovation here in San Francisco. Two things happen. One, I would love your thoughts on, as we engaged with DOE on some grants for bringing innovation, especially to the grid, bringing super low latency to the grid, how that information informs. We got really pejorative responses on those grant proposals because they said, oh, everyone in Silicon Valley thinks they're ahead of energy. And it was disheartening. So it's very exciting to hear Kara and some of these other approaches. So I have one question on, is this new money going to continue to have pejorative responses from embedded folks within the agencies who aren't thinking as far forward as you guys are? And the second question is, especially in early internet and national security things where we looked at large scale innovation, briefing people, having site visits, having in-depth briefings to see what the problem is, allows the entrepreneurs and inventors to have a different level of thinking. And so are you guys thinking about bringing people on site or doing deep dive briefings where people who have ideas from different spaces can bring them in? So I'd love your thoughts on those two. Thanks.
Both very meaty. Anybody jump in?
I mean, I can tackle maybe the last one and this one at the same time. I share the optimism that most people have, but I also I believe that true opportunity comes from the value you present, right? So there's ways to be able to leverage opportunities in front of us, and I think those are all incredibly valuable. But as an organization, we're really focused on ensuring that what we provide is value, and when we deliver value, there's always an opportunity, right? With respect to that sort of partnership between industry and organizations, developmental organizations or startups, we've tried to do an awful lot of that with the customers that we have. As an example, I think it's 2 weeks from now, there's 40 members of our organization who are going to be on site for 2 days worth of workshops with one of our customers, specifically looking at challenges and issues that they have in a cooperative way to try and find new and creative ways to be able to resolve them. And I think that is a commitment between, you know, the industry and those organizations that they think are capable of providing value to ensure that, you know, we tackle problems that they have and that we're focused on issues that are valuable to them.
Anybody else want to comment on this?
Yeah, I was going to take a different approach in answering that question about how do we bring community aspect in and how do we use the ecosystem more effectively to get those new ideas flowing. And this challenge is one of the best examples that we have of being able to do that. But in addition to that, 35 Mules is our internal economic accelerator that we're looking for community involvement, companies that want base here in Florida, that we actually bring them on site, give them the resources of the parent company, and make sure that they're meeting with people from across the organization to do idea sharing. And then on top of that, we're also hosting community hackathons. So something that is more in the weeds, anybody who wants to grow their career, expand their skill set, but also a good way of us learning from the community. Hey, what are you guys interested in? What do you think the future should look like? And how should we be thinking about things differently? So I know that we might be unique, and I even internally to our organization, I know that I have very, very different perspectives than some of the other thought processes. But I will tell you that the sharing narrative is a better narrative. We tend to do more when we can collaborate. We tend to get further when we can cross communicate and learn from each other. So I'm really, really sorry to hear that those responses from the San Francisco area, but it's not something that I'm immune to either. So happy to be on the side of trying to change that.
And Saritha, you know, the second part of Tara's question makes me just realize the range of innovation that we need. We can't even envision all the things we need at this point for climate response. And I'm just curious whether Elemental has programs, you know, what she was sort of suggesting, you know, just take people out and show them the problems and maybe they'll come up with new ideas for startups and technology. Do you guys do anything along those lines to sort of just brainstorm what kinds of innovations are going to be needed?
So Elemental is kind of a late stage accelerator. We're not an incubator. And so incubators are more kind of the ideation phase. For Elemental, we're really focused on helping companies bring on commercial inflection points.
Right.
So companies that have an operating prototype. And that's why innovation challenges are really kind of perfect for where Elemental sits, is that we want to bring on these commercial inflection points. For Transcend, it was they were working in the wastewater segment and really wanted an anchor utility customer to let them launch into a new segment and do transmission and grids and substations. And so that's the kind of commercial inflection points that we are focused on. So not on ideation, but really on ramping, whether it's a new customer segment, product launch, or going to the market for the very first time. We're focused on companies that's our sweet spot, helping you guys commercialize faster. And then to the piece on equity, through and through, we want to keep equity at the core of our work. And so we're now kind of focusing on with our innovation challenges too, is leveraging Elemental Square Partnerships model, which is the 4 points on the square. And Adam's nodding because he's one recent recipient of some of our funding for Square Partnerships. But that includes the investor, which is Elemental, the technology provider, which is our startup, the customer, someone like Nextera, and then community organizations. Bring them to the table early and often, and you're going to get ideas that can influence how you're going to design your software or how you can more equitably deploy your technology in these communities. So we want to make sure that we bring as many voices to the table as possible because we believe that it is the right thing to do, but also good business.
Yeah, that's such a cool thing you do, and it's a different stage of the process, but it's very related to what Tara was suggesting. Adam, comment on anything you want, but going to the core theme of this roundtable, you know, the challenges and the opportunities and the ability of climate tech startups to to move more rapidly. I just love you to talk about any other challenges that you guys have encountered at Transcend that maybe would be helpful for others to understand, and maybe how you've addressed them.
One of the things I like to remind our own team of and our customers is that the technology is only as good as the people that are using it. So even if we build the best generative design platform on the planet for infrastructure, if the engineers or the planning teams inside of someone like Nextera don't use it, then it doesn't matter. And I would say the same is true of Robert's company with Niera. He might have the best digital twin product on the planet, but if no one's adopting it, it doesn't matter. So one of the challenges and one of our really big value drivers for the work that we do with our clients is helping them with the adoption of new innovation and new technologies. I would say as much time is spent on configuring software to make it fit for purpose, we spend just as much, if not more time, sitting down with the people who will be using it and helping them think through, what is the value to you? How will your workflow change? What outcomes are we driving towards by the use of the tool? Because that's what makes the difference. It's not the technology, it's the people who are using the technology.
Very
You know,
cool.
just to add on to what Adam said, I think it's a really good point. And we maybe think of it slightly different, but in the same vein. Humans aren't very good at change, right? In fact, I think it's one of the things we're terrible at. You know, that I think that manifests as resistance when we look at technology, we look at change inside of our community, we look at how we energize things differently. And you know, there's a lot of organizations that have recognized that that's a challenge for them. And we hear things like white glove service, you know, customer success, all these elements associated with projects that we do now. And I think you see many companies dedicate a lot of time to that. You know, as an example, we embed employees with our customers when we do deployments, and it's because one of those forms of resistance is a lack of understanding, right? If you've done something once and you don't do it again for 6 weeks, it's hard to remember how to do it, and it's much easier to go back to the way you're doing before. Having that consistent involvement and that commitment to it, I think, is important. And everybody who's in the panel today, I think, is part of we're all change agents. We're helping the industry find a new way. I think our continuous need for innovation sometimes manifests in things like the way we do our customer success, as opposed to trying to charge for that. It's something that comes as a portion of that work to ensure that an implementation is successful, that people understand how to use it and they can take advantage of it, just to ensure that element of change works.
Robert, just to continue on one other thing, you said in our prep call yesterday something I was intrigued by in terms of the motivation that you feel and that Niera feels, which, you know, I'd love you to say that again, because it's impressive. It's hard to believe, frankly, but I'd love to hear you say it.
I mean, it sounds altruistic, but you know, it's I think if you follow the curve through it makes sense. We're not really motivated by money, right? I think money is just an outcome of what we do. And if we're successful at what we do, it comes as a factor of it, right? And I think there's different ways that organizations look at their business, right? They can start economically, to view every opportunity as a way to generate funds, right? Or they can look at it more as a mission, right? That what they're doing is attempting to change the way an industry works. You know, the last 20 years of my career have been focused on that. I left a job that I absolutely loved, probably the best job I ever had in my life, to go and work for a utility that had a major disaster. And the reason that I did it was because it was an opportunity to be able to change it. And I had my own disaster when I was there, a pretty critical accident that I came back from afterwards, and, you know, it helped reinforce what we were doing. If we're successful at implementing change and we make it valuable, the economic aspects are just an outcome of it. So I think we focus differently than maybe some organizations do, that the dollars come as a function of what we accomplish.
I do love that way of thinking. And I have to say, I have been giving thought in the last 24 hours to how this extraordinary step that Chouinard at Patagonia has just taken is going to affect the thinking of businesses more broadly, because it was such an astonishingly aggressive societally responsible step that is just not the way business leaders typically allow themselves to think. And yet we have to really rethink capitalism here. I mean, there's no question of that. I was at a dinner last night. I got talking to somebody about garbage. It's amazing the attitudes towards garbage that still prevail with almost every business. And there's this amazing Instagram account she was telling me about called The Garbage Walker, which has become, it's us 80,000 followers. This person just goes, I'm just using as an example. This person goes to businesses and opens up their trash to see what's in there and then puts it on the internet. And it has led to some significant shifts. The reason I'm just mentioning it because we need radical changes in business thinking across the board. But anyway, that was just whatever it is for me. But Saritha, I do want to make sure before we wrap that you get a chance to talk about what you're doing with Amazon and New Zealand and other partners, because I think, again, Elemental Accelerator is such an interesting and valuable organization in a unique place in the ecosystem.
Yeah, so thanks for that opportunity. So we are building off the success of our pilot with NextEra in December 2021 and opening up the Innovation Challenge opportunity for other, corporate members and partners of ours. And so for, NextEra, we're supporting their kind of real zero goal of fully removing carbon from their operations in what we've called the Real Zero Challenge, which is very exciting. For Amazon, they several years ago, came out saying they want 50% of their packages to be net zero carbon by 2030. And Amazon looks at logistics in terms of first mile, middle mile, last mile. And so we are working with the middle mile team to help them achieve kind of their piece of shipment zero by 2030. And then with New Zealand, their challenges with the grid are no different than, other states, regions, island states, and they are seeing very high rapid DER penetration.
What is DER, sorry?
Oh, sorry, distributed energy resources.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
And they need help optimizing their grid, asset management. Robert and Adam, I'm looking at you both to apply for this one. It's a live in-person pitch event in New Zealand. Expenses paid for. So would love to see
Media
both
companies
participate there.
participate in that?
Yeah. So for New Zealand, it's their decarbonize New Zealand's grid, help them achieve a clean and equitable energy future. So and we have some really exciting ones in the pipeline for next year as well. But we're very honored to be able to work with some of the largest organizations in the world on their highest priority challenges. And what motivates me, Robert, you said we're not motivated by money. I mean, for us, it's just we want to. Our North Star is to accelerate these solutions to help them scale equitably. And yeah, we're happy to be here. And one of the things that I keep running through my head is that one of our partners had said that, they had heard that founders took 2 years to get to the right person, the right decision maker within this organization. And that is just too long. And Adam and Robert, you guys are nodding, like that is not an unknown thing. People know. So with innovation challenges, Kara, to use one of your quotes, this cuts out the red tape of engaging with large corporates. You have committed capital, you have decision makers, you have their attention, and they are empowered to make these quick decisions. And so yeah, that is really what these are designed to do. And we want to do a bunch of them next year. So
you guys are like professional corporate networkers for.
Yes, that is my job. Yes.
That's a very good role to play. Well, I think we're wrapping up, but I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to have a conversation like this with a big company like NextEra and startups. We need more of that kind of dialogue. And I really am grateful that all of you have been able to take time for this today. But I want to just invite anyone who has any final thoughts that they might have hoped to say at the session that we didn't get to feel free to jump in and make any final comments. Anybody got anything to?
I mean, I have one. I'm hoping, part of the reason I did this, that I'm hoping that there's other organizations out there that'll listen to what we've talked about. And it takes it takes a big effort to put a step forward and engage in these kind of things, but we won't be able to change the way anything operates if people don't take that risk, right? And I think we're examples of the success that can come from that. So I hope there's other people out there who are thinking about a change that they can implement. They're thinking about something that they believe can be done differently, and they'll take this step to try and push that forward.
Terrific. Anybody else? Last chance. Well, thank you so much. The video will be available after the fact, so tell all your friends, relatives, neighbors that if they want to learn more about how startups can work with big companies and how energy infrastructure can evolve more rapidly, watch it. And thank you so much. Look forward to working with all of you in other ways in the future. And thank you to everyone for being here. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks again.